those topics. And our topic today is just as important and critical to our community. Our kids are not broken. Empowering traumatized young people. Our keynote speaker today is Dr. Ken Gisberg, a pediatrician specialized in adolescent medicine at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and a professor of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. For Covenant House of Pennsylvania, Dr. Gisberg serves as the Director of Health Services. As someone who has looked at his work and his research, I can tell you he is a man who cares about the community, a man of the mind, the heart, and the spirit. We're blessed today to have him in our presence today to inform us and to inspire us today. Join me to welcome Dr. Kenneth Gisberg to be our keynote speaker today.
Look at that child. Allow yourself for a minute to look at his face. Allow that face to remind you why we do what we do, why we choose to serve.
In this face, we see hope and we see inspiration. I do not know this young man. What I do know is that he has escaped Africa and he's on a boat that is sinking. I do not know why he left. I do not know what circumstances made his family choose to risk themselves to build a better world for him. I do not know the circumstances, but what I do know is that he was on a boat that almost sank, and that he had a life that I cannot choose to imagine. And yet this kid instills in me hope. This kid reminds me why we do what we do. Why is this kid okay? Despite the fact that he is minutes or hours away from a sinking boat. Tell me why this kid is okay. What is this picture really about? This is about the family. This is about the adults around him. If you understand this picture, intuitively, instinctually, and spiritually, you understand everything we are here to talk about. Our kids will rise when we create the templates upon which they can rise. Our kids will be okay when we are the loving, responsible adults who create the milieu in which they can be okay. And today, I give, by the way, up to 5-day talks. So an hour is like listening, like drinking from a fire hose listening to me. All right? But in this very short period of time, we're going to test this mic again. Is this working now? This is now working. But this is not working. Is this working? Hello? It is. Okay. We'll try this. Okay. Is this working? Now I can move and talk. God is good. In this very brief talk, we are going to try to cover 3 key principles. Let me tell you something. I am teaching trauma-informed practices around the nation, and what is happening is that the message is backfiring. Within a very short period of time, you will get that what happens to you early in childhood will affect your body, your brain, your behavior, biology, and that of your grandchildren. And when you get that, one of the core principles of trauma-informed practice is to change your lens from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And when you get there, then you want to begin giving kids second chances, fourth chances, 10th chances. And indeed, that's wonderful to do. But when you do not hold kids accountable, when you lower your expectations for human beings because of what they've been through, then you become one more chain in the link of oppression. Which is why it is critical that we are both trauma-informed, but that we combine it with the best of what we know about making children rise. Which is why we need to also integrate it with positive youth development and trauma-informed practices. We're going to briefly touch today on how we work with human beings to eliminate shame from our interactions. Because the only way kids move forward is that they know that they are loved and cared about. And when we start our interactions focusing on their state of brokenness or their state of what they've done wrong. We bring shame and we bring stigma into the room. We're going to be talking about how to talk to kids so that we can honor the intelligence that they do have. We're going to talk about turning off the lecture and having kids own the solutions themselves. We're going to be talking about giving control back to people from whom control has been taken away. Because there is nothing more true about trauma. When you cannot trust the integrity of your own body, when you cannot feel safe walking the streets, you lose control. And anything indeed that we do that honors your internal wisdom, that gives you the choice, that is how we begin to heal. And then finally, we're going to just touch on managing stress. If you would ask me to come here to talk about sex, drugs, violence, gangs, bullying, I could do it all. I could do it all for 2 or 3 hours, each subject. And I plead with you not to make me waste my time. Because telling people what not to do doesn't work. What works is to begin to understand why people do what they do and give them an opportunity to choose to do things that are life-affirming, but still manage the stress and the complexity of their lives. Very briefly, positive youth development. The mother of positive youth development said that problem-free is not fully prepared. Meaning, we can never hold expectation or as a goal that our kids are gang-free, or that our kids don't use drugs, or that our kids don't become pregnant. How dare us only put into place programs in schools that tell people not to do gangs while we take their computers away, while we take their recess away. The only thing that is acceptable is that we have the full expectation that every child is going to become the 35, 40, and 50-year-old ready to lead us into the future, fully prepared. So I'm not against those programs, by the way, but they've got to be in context. They can't be don't do drugs. They have to be don't do drugs because I expect the best of you and will give you the opportunity and resources to meet it. Then I'll take your drug program. Here's the bottom line. What makes a difference in kids' lives is the people. People might come into the Boys and Girls Club for the pool, but that's not what changes their life. What changes their life is the coach. It's the people that matter. Resilience, another quick model. It's the ability to overcome adversity, the capacity to bounce back. It's a mindset. If you understand what I'm about to show you now, you would understand the essence of what I do in a 5-day training as we transform people's ability to really gain control of their minds. Here's what you need to know. We all come from the jungle. 50,000 years ago, that's where we were. And what's the most dangerous thing that can happen to you in the jungle? You get eaten by what? So here I am in my jungle chair, and I smell a tiger. What am I supposed to do right now? I'm supposed to jump, and I'm supposed to run. Let's talk about what's happening to your biology to get you ready to jump and run. The first thing you feel is butterflies. Remember, if someone came into the room with a gun right now, or a tiger slipped in the back door, first thing you would feel is, ooh, why is that? Because if I'm getting ready to jump and run, where do I need the blood right now? I need it in my butt, which is my jumping muscle, my legs, which are my running muscle. So what are butterflies? Butterflies is the blood going from your belly to your butt so you can jump. How cool is that? All right? Then your heart beats fast. Why? So you can pump that blood. Then you sweat. Why? So you can cool off while you're running. You breathe fast so you can oxygenate that blood. Your pupils get big. Why? So you can jump over the log and not fall over. And you can't think clearly when there's a tiger chasing you. Why is that? Because you're not supposed to turn to the tiger and say, I don't know, can we work it out? Can we solve this problem together? Nor are you supposed to turn to the tiger and say, how does it feel to you to want to eat me? So when we are running from the tiger, we cannot problem solve, nor can we empathize. And if we understand that, then we understand that at the core of resilience is helping human beings being able to tell the difference between what is a real tiger and what is a paper tiger. Can it kill me? Or can I get through this? Only then can we create the setting in which people can think and can empathize. And that is at the core of moving people who've been through the most to the point where they can solve their own problems. Is helping them understand, because as you will know in a few minutes, these kids have brilliant amygdalae. Their ability to sense a tiger is on fire compared to what yours is. And what that means is they can't think or empathize when they sense danger. It is your job to help them know when there's danger is real, and when they need to bring out their superpowers, and when they need to understand that they're actually safe, so they can bring out the best side of themselves. Resilience is not invulnerability. We want our kids to be compassionate, we want them to be empathetic. We don't want them to shut down their emotions, we want them to leverage their emotions. And one of the things about kids who have been through the most is they are the most compassionate human beings on earth. They bring so much. We do not want to shut them down or deaden their feelings. We want to teach them how to celebrate their feelings and know how to use them in the proper setting. This slide is life-saving. When resilience reaches its limits, when adolescents are depressed and they look like adults who are depressed, we actually catch every single moment. When a kid looks like an adult who's depressed because they're gaining weight, losing weight, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, we know those kids. Indeed, when we ask a kid if they're sad and they say yes, we catch them. But the biggest mistake that adults make in serving kids is believing, even for a moment, that adolescent depression looks like adult depression. It doesn't. Half the time. Half the time it does, but the other half of the time, it looks like irritability, it looks like rage. And right there in that red bullet, irritability and rage, is the school to prison pipeline, right there. It is right there. It is that we see kids as bad rather than sad. And as a result, we lose the opportunity to intervene in their lives. Breathe, because now it gets hard. Because of the size of this, I'm going to read this to you. Once upon a time, there was a town built beyond the bend of a beautiful river. Children were playing beside the river when they noticed 3 bodies in the water. They ran for help, and the townsfolk quickly pulled the bodies out. One was dead, so they buried her. One was ill, so they took him to the hospital and nursed him back to health. The third was healthy, so they placed her with a family who cared for her and took her to school. Every day, bodies came floating down the river, and every day, people tended to them, taking sick to the hospitals, placing the healthy with families, and burying the dead. This went on for years. The townsfolk came to inspect the bodies, and they developed elaborate systems for recovering and attending to them. Some were generous, and a few gave up their jobs to do this full time. The town developed pride in its generosity and efficiency in its body tending. However, during all these years, and despite the effort, nobody thought to go upriver beyond the bend that hid what was above them and find out why the bodies were floating down the river. Folks, we have always known that bad things ran in communities. We have always known that if something bad happened to a grandmother, it was more likely to happen to the grandchild. And then we came up with the only understanding that made sense to us, which is there's something wrong with this community. There's something wrong with this family. Now, like we never have in the history of humanity, do we understand in the year 2017 why the bodies have been floating down the river? And more than anything, it is about childhood trauma. I want to show you a model that I'm borrowing from Cameron Phyllis Jones. She is a CDC-based researcher who studies the effect of racism and poverty on health. This is where we've gone in the last 100 years. This is a cliff. This is a child walking towards the edge of the cliff. They fall down. Indeed, this child hits the bottom and they are broken. And what we hope is that that child will be met with an ambulance that has air in the tires and can be taken to a hospital that can repair that child. And we in America, we are amazing at picking up broken bodies. This is called tertiary care. This is what I do when I'm in Children's Hospital. But then some people looked and they said, that's crazy. Why would you let people fall and hit the bottom in the first place? So they built a trampoline halfway down. And then what would happen is people would come and they'd bounce and they'd bounce and they'd bounce and they'd bounce. We fantasize that people would bounce up, but that's really hard to do. And during times of economic stress or social duress, that trampoline gets holes in it and kids fall through. And this is what I do at Covenant House. And this is called secondary prevention. And then some people said, that's crazy. Why would you let them fall off the cliff in the first place? Let's build a fence. So they built a fence at the very edge of the cliff in the hope that they would keep kids in. And most kids do stay in. But in times of economic stress or social duress, that fence gets holes in it and kids fall through. And this is called primary prevention. Now the question is, we're going to build a fence. So who stays in? Where do we build the fence? So we do simple epidemiologic studies that look at a demographic and equate it with risk. And the answer comes to the surface very quickly. It's black people. It's brown people. It's people from our indigenous nations. It's gay people. And now you have racism in social policy. And more important than racism in social policy is the unconscious biases we have in our every single human interaction, because it is poison to assume risk in a human being because of a simple demographic. And then, about 15 or 20 years ago, we went backwards and we said, what are the social determinants? In other words, why let the kid get to the fence in the first place? Let's pull them back. What are the things that move you there? And this was an amazing step, because this is factually about racism, about race. You're not going to find a single study that doesn't find black people at greatest risk because of racism. You're not going to find a single study that doesn't find gay people at a greater risk because of homophobia. And now you have the beginning of the solution. And where we are right now, in 2017, like we have never been in the history of humanity, is that we understand that the common denominator is childhood trauma. That bad things happen to marginalized and oppressed populations. And how did we get here? We first got here through a study done in San Diego County with 18,000 folks from the age of 18 to 85. This is an insured population, so they're relatively middle class. They are diverse, but mostly white. And what this study did is the same thing that all studies ever did in healthcare. The first thing they did is they said, tell us about your health status. Have you had diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancer? All those normal questions. Then they went a step further. They said, tell us about your behavioral status. Do you protect yourself when you have sex? Have you been to prison? Are you depressed? Have you attempted suicide? Have you abandoned your family or fathered children that you are not with? And then they went a step further than anyone had ever gone, which is they said, tell us what happened to you in your childhood. Who here is familiar with the ACEs? Raise your hand. So that makes Philadelphia pretty advanced relative to other cities. All right, so they said, tell us what happened to you in childhood. Were you emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused, neglected, exposed to substance use in your household, mental illness, domestic violence? Were you sent to prison? Were either or both of your parents sent to prison? Were your parents divorced, or did you experience parental abandonment? And then for each one that you said yes to, they gave you a number, 1. And then you were scored either 0, meaning none of this happened to you, 1, 2, 3, or 4 or above. So let's talk about what's wrong with this study before we talk about what we know. So the first thing is that the study ends at 4. All right? The second thing, meaning that if you come to Covenant House, I've never met a 4. My kids are 8, 9s, and 10s. And if you add things like racism and holding your brother when he was shot, and poverty, which is what Philadelphia is leading the nation in adding to the new ACEs, then my kids are 11, 12s, and 13s, which means that anything that I'm about to say to you is an underestimate of reality. So know that to begin with. Second, before I give you any data, I want to talk to you about how to present it in a way that's not poisonous. Every one of you has now scored yourself. Every one of you knows what your score is, which means I run the risk of traumatizing you right now with information. So let's soften it. Number one, predictive is not a determinant. In other words, if something is more likely to happen to you, it doesn't mean it will happen, but it means you need to put into place more protective factors in your life. Number two, it is not bi-directional. In other words, yes, it is true that you are more likely to be obese if you were traumatized. No, it is not true that you can look at an obese person and say they were traumatized. That is extremely dangerous. And number three, those people who have been traumatized are the most wonderful people in the world. They come to the world with a different kind of credential. They have brilliant amygdalas, which we're going to talk about later. But make no mistake about it, if we eliminated trauma from people's lives, we would lose most of those of us who are healers. Most of us who have turned around and wanted to raise the next generation. Make no mistake about it. There is a different credential that you earn when you have been through it. But let me tell you what we know. If you were traumatized, you were more likely to use drugs, go to prison, have mental illness, 12 times more likely to attempt suicide, less likely to be with children that you've produced. Does that surprise you? Any of you? No, we know this. This is logical. If you were traumatized as a child, if you were neglected or abused as a child, you are more likely to be obese. You are more likely to have high blood pressure. You are more likely to have heart disease, cancers, strokes, diabetes, lupus, the common cold. If you were neglected as a child, you are more likely to have brittle bones and break a hip when you're 80 years old. Knowing this changes everything. Because we actually know how to solve the healthcare crisis if we could ever think beyond one congressional cycle, and the answer is protecting children. But let me tell you something. I'm not here to give you bad news. That's not who I am. I'm a resilience guy. I am here because of this. Because what we also know is that if bad things happened to you during childhood, but you had a loving adult standing alongside you, you end up looking like everybody else. That's why I'm here. Do you want to know the science behind this? Yes? Here's what we know. I am in a situation now where I'm living in my house and a real tiger comes to me or something desperate comes to me. The dominant hormone in my life is adrenaline, and it says run and escape, and indeed I do. But if the dominant hormone in my life is, the problem in my life is my daddy in my bedroom is abusing me, or pervasive racism or poverty, things I cannot escape, then I need to be ready to jump in any direction at any time. I need to be hyper-vigilant, be able to look at my entire environment, and be ready to jump at any time. What do you think my blood pressure needs to be? It has to be high, because otherwise when I jump, I faint. So the dominant hormone in my life becomes cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that makes me keep my blood pressure high. It indeed changes my brain, and that of my grandchildren. It changes my brain to make me hypervigilant, to see and imagine the tigers and be able to run and jump and escape at any moment. That's what it does. And cortisol will make my blood pressure stay high and change my endocrine system, my glandular system for life, and that of my grandchildren, to keep my blood pressure high. And if it's going to make me eat more, drink more salt, and that's going to make me obese, and that's going to make me have heart disease, and that's going to lead to hypertension. Now, if you go to the CVS and you have a red rash, and you go to the pharmacist and you say, can you give me something for this? What do they give you? They give you cortisol. Why? Because it is an immune suppressant. And if I have been bathed in an immune suppressant throughout my entire life, my immune system is either going to get down-regulated, meaning turned down, in which case I'm more likely to get cancer, or dysregulated, meaning be a bit wacky, in which case I'm more likely to get lupus. Everybody knows this. This is science, we all agree. Now we're moving into Ginsburg theory. Ginsburg theory is defined as, guys, this makes a lot of sense to me. What we know is that the grandmother is protective, but we do not know why. Here's what I think. When my daddy comes home drunk, and my grandma says to me, hey, you're sleeping with me tonight. Don't let him bother you, come with me. When my neighborhood is unsafe and my grandmother looks outside and she looks at the corner and she says, those boys ask you to come out, you say to them, no, your grandma said no. And therefore what happens is I borrow her hypervigilance. Indeed, I borrow her cortisol, which means I do not need to mount my own. And that is the power of love. That is the power of love. But what else do we know about those grandmas? We know that they die too soon because they absorb the pain from the community. They absorb the trauma to protect the next generation. Let me tell you something about being trauma-informed. In this 1 hour talk, I'm teaching you practically nothing. But if we were really able to focus and really talk about how to build a trauma-informed Philadelphia, let me tell you what we're really asking you guys to become. The grandmas. To become hypervigilant, to protect children everywhere. And I don't want you to be personally harmed because of that. Which means we daren't become trauma-informed without in parallel thinking about how to protect those adults who are now going to absorb the pain for the children, or it will backfire. Unless until when? The science is very clear that we can protect children if we intervene very early in their life, but what the science is not yet clear about whether we can, at what point you can make a difference in an adolescent's life. But which one of these children are you willing to give up on? Pick one. Who are you going to give up on? Right? And this is my favorite slide of the day, besides the first one. The proper time to influence the character of a child is 100 years before he's born. And each of us lives our childhood in the values of past generations. So we have always known that bad things ran in communities. We never understood what was going on. So when I was in high school and I was studying psychology, the big question was, is it nature or is it nurture? Do you know what the answer is? Because we haven't. Do you know what the answer is? It's both. When I was studying genetics, what we understood was that you had a mommy and you had a daddy and you had dominant hormones and you had recessive hormones. They got put in a blender and that produced who you are. Now we have something called epigenetics. And it's different. What we now understand is that within each of our chromosomes lies the entire history of evolution. You can grow a tail, wings, gills, but you don't. You don't because all of those genes are suppressed. And the only things that get expressed are those things you need to be a human being. So you get born with a certain set of expressed genes. And then what happens is what you then begin navigating your environment. And as you navigate your environment, other genes become expressed or suppressed. So if you are living in a traumatizing environment, suddenly the genes that become expressed are those that you need to keep your blood pressure high. And here's what we never knew until like literally 10 years ago. What gets expressed in your life is going to get passed to your grandchildren. It's going to get passed to the next generation. Because what gets turned on for you to need to navigate your environment stays turned on for the next generation. And that is why African Americans have higher blood pressure than Africans. Because if it was purely genetic, it would be the other way around. But this is what 300 years of oppression does to genetics. What does it do to your brain? There are three key elements of your brain that are affected. The first is the green part of your brain, which is called your amygdala. This is the same part of your brain that a toad has, that a frog has. It says run, jump, snake, slither away. This part of your brain is on fire. This part of your brain is brilliant. This part of your brain is really hyper-vigilant and always turned on to sense danger. The red part of your brain is the part of your brain that helps you to organize your thoughts and feelings and to make your decisions. It's called your cerebral cortex. This part of your brain is thinner and less organized than it would be otherwise when you've been bathed in your hormone. And your hippocampus, the semicircular part of your brain, is what integrates thoughts, feelings, and emotions and moves them into practical wisdom, knowledge, and memory. And that part of your brain is less organized, which means these kids are more likely to have learning differences. And what does it do to your behavior? The first thing it does to your behavior is that it makes you less likely to trust people, which I have to tell you is really hard for me. I did 12 years of research on human trust. I have only a few minutes to really get to know a kid, to be able to come up with a plan. So when you don't trust me, it's hard for me. And another thing about these kids, and remember this is intergenerational, so their parents as well, is that they're more likely to be highly reactive. What does that mean? Road rage. Think about in the theater, the guy who like spills popcorn and 99 people see that he's okay and he watches the movie, but there's the one guy who just keeps looking and says, "You messed up my entire movie, you come here if we're gonna work this," right? That guy, hyper-reactive. Very hard for me to work with because more than anything else, I value calm. Like being calm is a really important thing, so it's so hard for me to work with these kids. And another thing about these kids is that they're more likely to lie to you. Why is that? Because if you grew up in a house where your daddy comes home and says, "Who ate the last hot dog?" and you say, "I did, Daddy," and he throws you against the wall, you stop seeing hot dogs. But when I need to make a decision very quickly about a human being and they're not telling me what's going on, it's hard for me. And another thing about these kids is they're more likely to zone out, to space out when you're getting close to them, or they're more likely to confabulate, meaning making up a story that makes no sense. And indeed, that's why they survive. Because when bad things are happening to them, the most protective thing in their life was to not be present. They remember the Super Bowl stains on the walls, they remember the water stains on the ceilings, but they don't remember what happened to them. But for me, what I need more than anything is for you to be with me and tell me what's going on. So it's hard. And another thing is that sometimes these kids are so hard to connect with. You know, you go and you want to connect with them, and you try once and you dive in, but they don't give you back what you need. And you try a second time, but they don't give you what you need. And a third time, but they don't give it right away. So you withdraw. When what that kid needed was a seventh try, right? But do you see how hard it is for me to work with these kids? Who are lying when I value truth, not connecting when I value presence. They are reactive when I value calm. They're not trusting me when my whole career has been about building trust. Do you see how hard this is for me? If I thought it was about me. Trauma-informed practice begins with knowing what is about you and what is not about you. If you begin absorbing other people's pain and think that it is about you, then what happens is you become defensive, which is one small step away from becoming offensive, and your capacity to love is diminished. Trauma-informed practice begins with being able to be fully present and understanding what is about you and what is not about you. See, trauma does not break kids, nor does it cause brain damage. There are lots of kids, foster care parents are less likely to take teenagers now because they're saying, "Don't give me a brain damaged child." We are backfiring, guys. The science is backfiring. We've got to present it differently, all right? First up, predictive is not an absolute determinant. Second, these kids do have a different kind of credentials. You know why? Because they have a brilliant amygdala. That green part of their brain, that amygdala, it's on fire. And that makes them more likely to be reactive and more likely to go off. But you know what else lives on the amygdala? Compassion, connection, empathy. When we create calm environments where kids know that they're not in danger, what comes out is their beauty. And these kids got a double dose of worry and a triple dose of love, of wanting to repair things. And if we work with the amygdala by creating a calm environment, we will see the very best in these kids. What I personally believe, and we literally just did it at Covenant House an hour ago, what I personally believe is my potential biggest contribution to this field is changing the labeling. You talk to these kids, here's what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you they have an anger problem. And then they're going to have received psychiatric labels. And we know for an absolute fact that your psychiatric label is going to be different depending on your demographic. If you are well-resourced and white, you are more likely to be called attention deficit disorder. And when I invest in you, I am likely to give you accommodations and medications that allow you to focus. And if you are Black, Latino, or Indigenous, or poor, you are more likely to be told that you have oppositional defiant disorder, or conduct disorder, or bipolar disorder, or my personal favorite, intermittent explosive disorder. And then when I invest in you fully, I give you a medication that blunts your affect. And when I invest in you fully, I build a new prison for you. This is the reality. So we've got to unlabel these kids using a strength-based approach that is indeed reality-based. Here's the conversation. Doc, I have an anger problem. I'll bet you earned it, huh? Let me ask you a question. Are you someone who sees danger that other people don't see? Yeah. You got a little brother or sister? Uh-huh. Do you watch out for them? Always, because what happened to me isn't going to happen to them. Do you have good friends? Mostly associates, but a few. Tell me, how is it that they would describe you? Oh, they get me. They say I get them. They come to me for advice because they say I see it. Yeah, and you watch out for them when they're in trouble? Always. And if trouble is coming your way, let me ask you a question. Are you more likely to do what it takes to prevent something bad from happening to you? Always. So let me make sure I got you right. You've been told you have an anger problem, but you see danger other people don't see, and you'll take the steps you need to take to prevent that danger from happening. Am I right? Yes. And your friends say that you care pretty deeply, and you show that with your family. Am I right? Always. Well, dude, you know what? You don't have an anger problem. You have a protector's brain. And that is your gift. And if I was on a desert island, I want you to be alongside me, because you keep both of us okay. That is a gift that you bring to the world. That is your superpower. What I want to talk to you about a little bit is about when to bring your superpower out and when to leave it inside. Because if you see danger that's not really there, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Can we figure out a way to work together to bring out your superpower while letting you solve problems, and then knowing when to keep your power away and use another one of your strengths? That is love, and that is life-changing. Because if you think those labels don't make a difference to a kid, you talk to any one of my kids. 3 key principles of trauma-informed practices. Number 1, knowing what's about you and what's not about you. We talked about that. Number 2, Sandy Bloom, also from Philadelphia. Changing your lens from what is wrong with you to what happened to you. Number 3, giving control back to people from whom control has been taken away. Boys and Girls Club America motto, I'm their national resilience guy. To enable all young people, especially those who need us the most, to reach their full potential as productive, caring, responsible citizens. Make no mistake about it, kids who need us the most, they push us away. Kids who need us the most are the kids who push our buttons, raise uncomfortable feelings in us. Youth who need us the most withhold rewards from us. Who are we? We're the adults who love kids. We're the adults who care about kids. What that means is, more than anything, we want feedback from them. That's what keeps us going. And when kids don't give us the feedback we need, we withdraw too soon. Make no mistake about it. The cutest kids are the easiest to work with, but it's the kid in the back of the room whose nose is dripping down his shirt, who has no idea that an adult is capable of wiping his nose, that needs us the most. Make no mistake about that. So I want to just give you a couple of key principles in what we have left. Behavioral change is a process, not an event. There is forward movement, 3 steps forward, a couple steps back, 5 steps forward, 3 steps back, 7 steps forward, 6 steps back. What do you notice about where I am right now? I'm still forward. If you're the kind of adult who cheers as a kid is moving forward, good for you. Thanks for coming. I'm so proud of you. Make
make no mistake about it, that kid will grin from side to side. That kid will be so very proud to show you what he has accomplished. And when he moves backwards, you will never know. Because your praise was about what he did, not who he was. Your praise was about what he accomplished, not about the core of your relationship. When instead you learn to praise in a way that says, thank you for sharing this with me. The fact that you are always keeping me up on your life means the world to me. Then you will know when that kid is making forward movement and backward movement, and you will be able to be the kind of adult who will stay with him. Behavioral change. There are 5 key steps to behavioral change, which I'm not going to go into deeply here. But let me tell you, there's another concept in behavioral change, which is pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation meaning people haven't even thought about it yet. And what we tend to think when someone is in pre-contemplative thought is, well gosh, if they haven't thought about it yet, they must lack knowledge. Let me be the kind of person who teaches them more stuff. Those are people who don't understand what pre-contemplation is. Pre-contemplation is not lack of knowledge. Pre-contemplation is about demoralization and shame. You do not need to go and tell a kid from a marginalized and oppressive environment about the danger of drugs. They can teach you in circles. When we focus only on the problem, we do not make a difference to demoralization. What are we going to do? We're going to look for kids. We're going to look in the field of their lives. We're not going to just see what they are doing wrong, because that's too easy. So here's the classic model. This kid is on drugs, this kid's selling drugs, this kid's pregnant, and what do? We tell the young man who's doing drugs, we say to him, young man, marijuana will fry your brain, make you grow breasts, and shrink your balls. All of which is incidentally true-ish. And how does he respond to that kind of a threat? He smokes more. Why was he smoking in the first place? Because he was stressed. And there was nothing I said about what was going to happen to him that helped. Nothing. I am going to instead listen for what that kid is doing right. I am listening for what is behaviorally operational. I am listening for insight in a kid beyond his years, compassion in a kid who was shown none in his life, resilience in the context of a life that would have destroyed me. I am listening for a strength that people have rarely noticed, but that is standing there ready to be recognized. I am listening for that strength so that I can put it in a behavioral conversation. So I am not telling him not to do drugs, though I'm going to get there. But I'm going to get there starting with his strength, so that I can talk to him in a way that looks more or less like, I love you, I love you, I love you, without using the word love, because that can be creepy, right? But I love you by expressing to you what I see in you. Pause, deep breath. But I'm also going to tell you what I'm worried about. I wonder if we can work together for a solution. I wonder how I can support you in your plan. Heart, why I feel. Stomach, why I worry. Head, how we plan together. Hands, how can I be there to support you as you control your own life and I am but a facilitator along your journey. Heart, stomach, head, hands. What is love? Our goal is to take over the field of risk by recognizing the kid's strength. What is love? Covenant House, I'm actually charged with all Covenant Houses in the world with mission fidelity. Our mission is to serve with unconditional love and absolute respect. That is our mission. A mission I have never personally achieved because I'm fettered by my own humanity. Make no mistake about it. This is a godlike characteristic that I have never gotten to. We strive and we wrestle to try to get there. And never make a mistake about something else. When I tell you that you love and that you must love or you cannot serve, I am not telling you you have to like. Like is different. Like is subjective. You're not going to like everybody. You can absolutely love everybody. What is love? Love is seeing someone as they deserve to be seen, as they really are. not through the lens of the behaviors they've sometimes needed to display. Let me say something else for a minute. These young people who stood in front of us and who graced us with their voice, when we become trauma-informed, we do not assume that something bad happened to them. Everything I'm teaching you about being trauma-informed is being pro-development generally. Is there anything I'm suggesting that isn't good for every child? I am not labeling or assuming or treating kids differently. I am treating everyone in the same loving way. I am finding the strength in everyone. I am trying to make everyone problem solve, calm themselves, find solutions, manage stress. That is what we call being pro-development. The fact that it happens to be trauma-informed is also nice. But I'm not labeling anybody. Let's talk about control, for we got 17 or 18 minutes left. Let's talk about not lecturing kids. But before I tell you why not to lecture kids, I want to tell you what a lecture sounds like. Don't you know that what you're doing right now, Brianna, which I'm going to call behavior A, could easily lead to consequence B? I never imagined you doing consequence B, and now I wonder what's between your ears besides cobwebs. If consequence B happens, you're more than likely to go to C, which is more than likely going to go on to consequence C, or D. You never would have done consequence D if you'd have been hanging with Andy, whose own mother doesn't love him and you're letting him influence you. If consequence E happens, you're more than likely to go to consequence F, which is a slippery slope to consequence G, more than likely to lead to consequence H. Look at me, young man, when I'm talking to you. This is not for my own good. If consequence H happens, you're more than likely to go to consequence I. And do you know what happens if consequence I happens? Do you? You die. And what does the kid hear? Exactly. This is what the kid hears. Womp, 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 die. It's all about mathematical structure, guys. You do not need to move beyond the knowledge that you already have. You understand wisdom. You understand that the choices we make can lead to dire consequences. You understand that people can be incredibly manipulative. And by golly, kids want to hear it from you. They want to learn from you. But they want to learn in a way that they can think. The lecture is too abstract. The lecture looks like this mathematically. And when you talk to a kid in a mathematically algebraic way, they hear wong, 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 especially where they're running from a tiger. Because when you're running from a tiger, you're in no sort of mood to be thinking about the Pythagorean theorem. You're just not. And what we want to do instead is change the way we talk to kids so that we honor the intelligence that they do have, speaking to them in a mathematical structure that even someone in crisis can understand. It's simple math. You're thinking about doing behavior A. I think I get that, but I worry it could go to behavior B. Can we come up with a plan to make sure that doesn't happen? Tell me your thoughts to make sure that doesn't happen. When the kid is at B, and only when he's at B, which might be that day, it might be next week, only then do I take him to C. And when he's at C, and only when he's at C, which might be that day or might be next week, do I take him to D. I want to honor the intelligence he does have, give him one piece at a time so he gets it, gots it, owns it. When you own it, you assume control. When you own it, you do not need to rebel. When you own it and understand your ability to problem solve, you feel empowered. Suppose, let's do it again. You don't want that to happen. No, let's do it again. She goes to stab me. This time I stab her in the heart. What should we call this? Death. Had you considered the possibility that you're going to be dead today? No. What do you want to have happen? I want you to see what's happening here. I'm taking the lecture, I'm breaking it up into small, manageable steps. She's doing 80% of the talking and thinking. I'm just delivering her 1 aliquot at a time to give her control. That's what's happening. You fight now and you kill her. How do you feel? Happy. How long do you feel happy for? 14 years old. What's the answer? All day. All day. What happens the next day? She said, I get probation. I don't think so. And we sent her to jail for 20 years. How's your mom feeling?
now that you're in jail. Your mom is ashamed. Are you going to be able to finish, have kids when you're in jail? No kids. You going to be able to finish school? No education. What is it going to be like when you get out of jail? You're not going to be able to get a job. And she took it all the way out to dying poor with no family. Is that realistic? All right. Suppose you don't kill her. You don't fight. How do you feel? Angry. How long do you feel angry for? We let her finish school, have kids, make her mom proud. 2 lives saved. Is that brilliant? Thank you. Thank you very much. For you to get me and for you to get what I'm teaching, you need to really understand that there's no brilliance to this whatsoever. This is about breaking an abstract problem into a simple mathematical construct. So kids get it, got it, own it. Give power to the expert in the room. You are not the expert in the room. You have to learn the delivery model that allows the expert to come to their own conclusions. And that is about understanding brain science, and it's about understanding cognitive development, and it's about understanding that people running from a tiger in crisis cannot think abstractly, but indeed they can problem solve when you hand it to them in a way that they can. I'm going to skip this example. It's actually one of my favorite examples, but the point being that as long as people see a problem as a mountain and they look at solutions far in the distance, they will feel paralyzed and they will feel like they cannot problem solve. We break big problems into small pieces so that they can get one piece at a time. We ask them to focus only on what is right in front of them, and when they do, they suddenly understand they have power, and when you understand power, you get your control back. Next, resilience, at its core, is about learning to cope in a positive way with life's inevitable stressors. And we might do our greatest good by raising kids with a wide repertoire of positive coping strategies. See, here's the model. Here we go. Here's the model. Stress is incredibly uncomfortable. It makes you sweat, it makes you smell, it makes you not be able to think clearly. It's so uncomfortable, you gotta do something about it. Doing something about it is called coping. And there are positive ways of coping and there are negative ways of coping. And one of the biggest mistakes you can make from this model is to believe that the negative ways of coping don't work. Because they work great. They work best. The negative ways of coping really solve your problem immediately. Drugs, amazing escape. Punching someone in the face really makes you feel powerful. Having sex out of the context of a relationship, great way of feeling like someone cares about you, if only for a couple of minutes. The reason these strategies are called negative is because they are quick, self-destructive fixes. And indeed, whenever you hear the word quick, I want you in your next sentence to hear the word addictive. Because anything that solves a problem too quickly, you're going to want to do quickly over and over again. And it is at the root of addictions. So these coping strategies are not failing in their immediate term. But what they do is they lead you to more stress. And when you go to more stress, ultimately that will destroy your life. What am I going to do? I'm going to look at the kid who's already doing this negative coping strategy. I'm going to invite them in a healing, loving process, ask them, congratulate them for the fact that they've thought of something, anything, and ask them to consider other things. What do I really want to do? You know what I want you to do at Jesu? I want you to begin getting your adolescents ready when they're in kindergarten. I want you to build in them a wide repertoire of positive coping strategies. So that when life gets hard, and it will, because I can't change the world. All I can do is empower you to have the right choices in your life. That's what control is. And it's the root of being trauma-informed, is getting control back. I can't control the universe, I can only react how you choose to react to the universe. And when I am able to build in you positive coping strategies, then the path of least resistance goes in that direction. So
The American Academy of Pediatrics, it's all in the book out there. That book has about 120 pages on a comprehensive coping strategy. All right? We know what to do. I can't give it to you now. Not in a 1-hour talk. What I can tell you is the very beginning of it. I remember how we talked about resilience being a mindset. Well, the first place we're going to begin this mindset is defining the stressor. Our mind has the ability to determine how we react. And if we believe that we are in immediate danger, we will never empathize and we will never problem solve. So the full stress reduction plan is going to teach us how to run from the tiger, to burn up the adrenaline, how to breathe deeply, to get the blood back to the red part of your brain so you can solve. It's all there. But we begin by asking these 3 questions. Hey, this thing that's bothering me right now, can it kill me? Because if it can't, it's only a paper tiger. So being able to distinguish between a real tiger and a paper tiger empowers us to think. Have you seen the movie Paper Tigers? Anyone? So that it comes from this slide. So the title comes from the slide. The second thing, how many of you have grandmothers who said to you something like, always say to yourself, you'll get through it or this too shall pass? Right? So being able to look at a situation and saying, how am I going to feel in a week? How am I going to feel in a month? Changes everything. Third, knowing when good things are permanent. Those of us who are particularly crazy and erratic, even when things are going well, we get all superstitious. But for people who have been traumatized, people who have not had a string of good opportunities in their life, when they're then surrounded by loving adults and opportunity, they don't believe it. And they shoot themselves in the foot. People who have been traumatized can't stand the possibility of losing the gains that they have temporarily achieved. And rather than allowing themselves to have someone else take it away, as indeed people have always taken from them, they will self-sabotage. So knowing this is really important. We lift human beings up, but we also need them to learn that that this is earned by them. If they believe it's been imposed by us or given by us, that is only one step of it being taken away, which is going to make you much more likely to self-sabotage. That is another reason we have to give control to people, so that they can own things and not worry about losing them. How are we going to judge our success? At the end of this talk, get ready for the panel. So not in ways that are easy to measure. So let's begin. Go ahead. JSU School, all the other schools represented from this region. Go measure the way everybody tells you to measure. Congratulations, do it. Measure grades and scores and graduations and post-secondary plans because they matter. But also begin to measure reduced expulsions and suspensions and have that as your goal. Not to extricate the kid who is in most trouble from the school so other kids can learn. Figure out how to make that kid learn by creating a trauma-informed environment. Next, I want to prove the stuff that we can't measure easily. I want to prove that adolescents are capable of healing from trauma. I want to help our young people experience that people are worthy of trust. Because that will have implications throughout the lifetime and across the generations. Why do we love? We love to help people understand that they're worthy of being loved. That's what it's about. Because when you make a child feel loved, he learns something. And that's going to carry far into his adulthood and the way he parents. See, I can't prove to you at what point you can intervene in an adolescent's life and change their brain structure. But I damn well can prove to you that if you intervene in a kid's life and makes him feel worthy of love, being loved, how he parents will be different. And that's going to make a huge difference. By making it more likely that our youth are going to be able to pass along our love to their children and thereby break the cycle of trauma and oppression. By making it so our young people can feel again. See, stress is not the problem. A little bit of stress activates you. A little bit of stress empowers you. The problem is when you become numb. When stress reaches such toxic levels that you lose the capacity to feel. And that's when we're really disempowering people is when we take away their ability to feel. And as I said earlier, by creating the environment where staff never forgets how to feel. Don't be trauma-informed if you're not taking care of your staff. They will burn out, they will become numb. As we bear witness to those things that are unspeakable truths, give me the trainings and boundaries. How to love and remain whole. How to love and go home. And when my daughter acts like a B+ on her test, it's a disaster, to pretend I really care. Because the day I turn to my children and say, you have no right to have your feelings, you should see what I see during the workday, is the day I lose my family. And the day I can only serve the kids I choose to serve, temporarily. And at the end of this talk, you're like, oh my God, my plate, it was already so full. And now this little man, he's telling me that I have to love the children? And what I'm telling you is that there's nothing I've said in the last hour that is new. I've taught you nothing. I've added no new program. I've added nothing to your plate. I've been talking about the plate the whole time. I'm talking about the foundation, the scaffolding upon which kids rise. That's what I've been talking about. And make no mistake about it, the scaffolding upon which kids rise is the power of human love, connection. That is what makes kids be okay. That's all that I've been talking about. And then what we also have to remember is that if you are looking at the end of your day for the affirmation or confirmation that you have changed a life in front of you, go home. Because at the end of the day, most days, I wonder whether I made a difference in people's lives. It's when I see the kid 10 years later, and he's like, Dr. Ken, do you remember me? And I'm like, and I don't, but I'm like, well gosh, your face really brings up some good feelings in me. And then he turns to you and says, well, I was a little bit knucklehead when I was there. I'd like you to meet my son. This is Jamal, and I'm a good dad. And you know where I learned about love? It was from the people who come around us. We are planting seeds for trees under whose shade we shall never sit. When we know that and when we believe that, when we understand that we are the foundation upon which kids rise, we can do our work. Thank you guys. Let's go.